Hello, it's Sue Anstis here, and just before you listen to this episode of The Game Changers, I wanted to quickly tell you that my new documentary, Game On, The Unstoppable Rise of Women's Sport, is now available to watch on Netflix in the UK. It's a powerful film that explores the recent growth in women's sport and its impact across society. It will open your eyes to the challenges faced by female athletes and bring hope for a future where women and girls have equal access and opportunity in sport. I really hope you enjoy it. Now it's time for the Game Changers. Hello and welcome to the Game Changers. I'm Sue Anstis, and this is the podcast where you'll hear from trailblazing women in sport. What can we learn from their journeys as we explore some of the key issues around equality in sport and beyond? I'd like to start with a big thank you to our partners Sport England, who support the Game Changers through a National Lottery Award. My guest today has been instrumental in the success of the British Paralympic team, helping them to achieve a record-breaking medal haul at 10 Paralympic Summer and Winter Games. Penny Briscoe competed for Great Britain in Canoe Slalom before becoming senior national coach for the British team at the Atlanta 1996 and Sydney 2000 Olympic Games. She's worked in parasport as a coach, team manager and performance director, and is now Director of Sport at the British Paralympic Association. She's also the chef de mission for Paralympics GB. In 2017, Penny was awarded an OBE for her services to disability sport. Penny, I'd like to start at Loughborough if I can, as I hadn't realised until I was doing my research that we were both there at the same time for a year in 1988. And I think you were there doing a PGCE, so was the plan always to become a teacher?
It was half a plan, I think. I grew up being a sport mad kid. Anything to do with sport was my bag. And as I got to do my O levels at the time, it's that far off back, it was like decision time. What was I going to do? What was I going to do for my A levels? And then what was I going to do beyond my A levels? And in sport at that time, as a female, there were probably only two options. One was being a PE teacher. The other was probably being a physio. And I didn't really see too much else. And I didn't really see myself in the science space. So I kind of went down the PGCE route. So I did my undergrad at Birmingham. I did history and PE, which was brilliant. And then I went to Loughborough to do my PGCE, which again was a fabulous year. And I think in many ways provided huge inspiration for me as a teacher, then as a coach.
And so why not PE, or teaching, I should ask, because actually that was my route. When I first went there, I, like you, similar time, but wanted to be a PE teacher. So what was the point at which you changed, you think?
Well, I taught for 6 years in secondary ed here in Nottingham. And then I did a year or just under a year actually at Stafford College. So I did enjoy teaching, but it was too much of an opportunity. There was a sort of a short-term role came up for a full-time coach to work within British canoeing. There was a national performance coach, but they were recruiting an additional coach for the Atlanta Games. And I hadn't taken that leap of faith as an athlete to sort of train full-time and see how good I could be. And I always regretted that I didn't really achieve my dreams as an athlete. Always working full time and, never really having the optimal training environment. And this was my chance at redemption to do something that I was really proud of. So I took that leap of faith, took a 9-month contract with the British Canoe Union and became that assistant Olympic coach as it was in that first year. And then lottery funding came sort of towards the back end of 97 96 into 97 and then I got a full-time contract. So I took a leap of faith and then was in the right place at the right time to be able to sort of maximise that opportunity.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear, isn't it? And obviously you were almost pre that lottery funding yourself as an athlete. Do you think had there been that funding, you would have continued a longer career competing yourself?
It's an interesting question, and I think there was funding coming into British canoeing because we were one of the best nations in the world, but it tended to be the old Foundation of Sport and Arts or the SAF, so there not too many awards. There were some good awards, but they were, we had world champions and Olympic medalists, and I was kind of just below that tier of athlete. I think the biggest issue for me is I picked up a lot of injuries, and I think that was probably working full time, always seeming to be on the go, training at the wrong times of the day, not really recovering, not focusing on prehab, let alone rehab. My shoulders were just absolutely shot to pieces. So I think I sort of retired gracefully without ever saying I'd retired, but knowing that I wasn't going to go to Atlanta as an athlete and just wanting to take that opportunity to be at the games. I just really dreamt of taking that opportunity, and I did. And, I'm really proud of what I achieved as a coach for British Canoe, and as the only female full-time coach in the programme at that time, and had an incredible experience as being part of those 2 Olympic Summer Games cycles.
And what was it like being a coach at those games? And it's such a fantastic opportunity for you as a young coach, or a newer coach, really, too.
Yeah, I'd always coach, not always coach, but I'd teaching. I guess my thing is helping others, whether it be teaching, whether it be coaching. So even when I was doing my undergrad, I supported the GB juniors, right. And then I worked with the Welsh squad. I did some private coaching. So from my sort of late teens, early 20s, I sort of got into coaching because it was the sort of a natural synergy with the direction I was going in as a teacher. Always enjoyed it. I probably enjoyed it because it was my sport. And I was so passionate about my sport and wanting to be part of it. And I guess knowing I wasn't going to succeed as an athlete, well, could I achieve something as a coach? So to be part of the setup going into Sydney was hugely exciting. And we didn't have our best games. It was, I don't know if you remember, Sue, but 1996, the British media dubbed Team GB as the team of shame. I think it was the worst set of results in something like 36 years or something. And as a GB canoeing squad, we went in with high hopes. We'd had a great World Championships, a home World Championships in 1995. We went in with medal potential pretty well in every class. And it's fine margins in whitewater canoeing, and a couple of things went against us. Lynn Race should have, could have medalled. Paul Ratcliffe could have. He was sort of the up and coming. Gareth Marriott. We had great athletes, and we just didn't have the best games. And I felt sad with the sort of some of the press that we had, because nobody goes into a major championship trying to fail. There was so much hard work that had gone in. There was so much potential within that team, and we bounced back at the World Cup final just a few weeks later. And thankfully, we went forward as a team, and I think GB Canoe Slalom has multiple medals at every game since then. Sydney was a different experience. Paul Ratcliffe got silver, and we had some great supporting results as well. And I guess that first games was of mixed experiences, but it kind of got me hooked, and I just love that multi-sport, the pressure of that once every 4-year environment, and I just wanted more. So that was me started, really.
And we don't see, do we, many elite female coaches at that top end, Olympics and Paralympics. So what was it like at the time, in 96, 2000? Was it any different then?
No, I mean, I think I was probably the only female on the circuit at that time, and where you found your company was that a lot of physios tended to be female. So going back to my original analogy of what do you do if you're a female and you want to excel in sport, and a big ally of mine was Julie Stark, who was still part of the EIS system, and we were kind of the two females in a very male-dominated coaching team. But, it's that diversity, isn't it, which helps create environments where both athletes and staff can thrive. So I think it was a great step forward for British canoeing. And I was probably one of the few in the UK system at that time that was full-time professional. And so, I kind of hope that it did pave the way for others. And it's certainly now a more diverse workforce, which it quite rightly should be. But there's still work to do, isn't there?
Absolutely. And what do you think makes it a great coach?
I think from my personal experiences, it's kind of just being yourself. I think you've got to be passionate about what you do. In my belief, I think at times I was probably a bit too passionate, and that was certainly one of the things that through my career, I've had to sort of curb a little bit and learn to sort of flex my style rather than full out passion all of the time, which I think is quite wearing for others. But I think from my perspective that, as I say, the synergy between teaching and coaching, so being well prepared for your sessions, making sure that you communicate early, you communicate appropriately. I think just being ambitious in terms of, I guess, working with like-minded people, setting the ground rules. So I coached a few young athletes early on, very talented GB young athletes, but working with them to sort of balance studies with training, with having some sort of social life, and how that sort of ebbed and flowed through the year. And I guess getting to know the individual, getting to know their family, their personal circumstances, and to sort of create the right environment, because every athlete is different. Every athlete responds differently to coaching style. And I think it's marrying up the individual athlete or that group of athletes with you as a coach and your preferences, and trying to get the best out of each other. So, it's definitely a check and challenge environment. I think it has to be open and honest. But I think, the critical thing is creating safe and secure environments where you can be yourself and you can say how you feel, and that's on both sides.
And have you seen a change in the culture around coaching elite athletes from, it's like 30 years ago as you started out, Atlanta and so on? Does it feel like it's a different place?
That's a really interesting question. And I think that, the world has moved on, hasn't it, in the last 30 years. And I think, we're different generations. I was a different generation as an athlete, as I was as a coach, as I now am as a director and leader. And I think we have to respond to how generational change has impacted in what athletes want from their sport, what they want from, their careers. I think there has been a change. I think we have to listen, we have to understand, and not just make assumptions, as to what athletes want now is quite different, and how they want to be coached, how they want to be communicated with. Yeah, I think it has shifted, but I think we had great coaches pre-lottery, and I think we've still got great coaches. Yes, we've had challenges in the system, but I think we're addressing those challenges, and again, quite rightly, health, well-being of athletes, health and well-being of staff should be paramount to the system. If it's going to be sustainable, if it's going to be healthy, if it's going to be positive, from a cultural perspective.
Absolutely. You joined the British Paralympic Association in 2001. So what first attracted you to the BPA and working in parasport?
It wasn't directly the BPA that I was looking to. So again, this is kind of one of those unintended consequences of a Coach Excel, I think it was back in the day, catch-up session with Rosie Mays. I'd said to her, I'm, maybe looking for a change. I've been in this sport for over 30 years now as an athlete and coach, and maybe have something different to look forward to post-Sydney. Maybe do a bit less travelling, I remember saying to her. She said, there's a couple of great jobs with David Tillotson at the British Paralympic Association coming up, and maybe you should apply. And I thought, okay, I'll have a look at that. And they were, I think they were called programme managers at that time. So I went for an interview, got one of the roles. Josh Hoyt-Smith later joined the BPA for a short while in a similar role. And then I probably spent the first 6 months thinking, I'm not sure this is what I expected. I think I applied thinking that Olympic sport, Paralympic sport were parallel at that time. They were just slightly different environments. But the reality was parasport was quite developmental. The reality is we were only formed as a BPA in 1989. So the first games as a Paralympic GB was 1992. So whilst our movement was formed out of the atrocities of World War II, our movement is still relatively young compared to our Olympic counterparts. So there hadn't been a lot of investment. The team had success, but it was quite developmental. There were pockets of good practice, but I think in 2001 we had 2 full-time coaches or directors. One was in athletics and one was in swimming. And so the environment that I came into was quite different. And I didn't necessarily feel that the sort of that development side was my was my skill set. I was used to working with elite athletes, a successful Olympic program. And it was one of those, I guess, moments where I just needed to sort of sit and just reflect. And where I got to was I can throw stones from the outside, saying, well, this isn't what I was expecting, or I can kind of roll my sleeves up and really step inside and try and make a difference. And that was what I decided to do, that I would try and learn and understand this new environment, because that effectively was what it was, and try and use my skills and experiences from Olympic sport. And that was everything from world-class start to potential through to the elite level, and try and take those learnings as an athlete, as a coach, we co-wrote the first world-class plan in that post-Atlanta period. Try and take all of those, I guess, skills and experiences and bring them to bear in this new environment. And it was quite humbling. I learned an awful lot from one of my colleagues, Kaz Walton, who was pioneers of parasport, multiple gold medalist as an athlete, still works for the British Paralympic Association now, and learned so much from her about parasport. Worked with great people in the BPA, and the system from sort of 2001 onwards just kind of started to evolve. There wasn't the same level of investment into Olympic sport, but that really did take a massive step forward when the home games were announced in 2005. But I remember quite vividly sort of just taking things back to basics and talking about, working with British athletics, and how do we manage expectations of the athlete? How do we move not only British athletics para program, but the global, I guess, parasport program forward in terms of taking these pockets of best practice and actually using those role models. Tanny Gray-Thompson, we had some brilliant athletes. How do we take how they work and make that the norm? So, almost raising the bar for every single athlete that comes onto a program. So we did a program called Beyond Gold. Yes, we could win gold, but we wanted more than that. We wanted to, professionalize the system, how we train, how we prepare, how we coach, how we manage. And so it was that's where it started. And then the movement has just grown massively, hasn't it?
And you mentioned there, obviously Paralympics sort of born in the UK, and we've got this long and proud history, but how is the BPA viewed globally?
I think the British Paralympic Association is really well respected. Clearly, we're hugely successful down to the talented athletes and their really dedicated support staff. We feature highly on the medal table, but we also, I think, do really well off the field of play. So whether that be in education, classification, there's an awful lot we do that I think has benefited not only parasport in GB, but also on a global basis. We work collaboratively with colleagues. I've mentored colleagues from around the globe, new Fiesta missions. So I think, we take our position really seriously in terms of, yes, of course, we want to be successful. That's what it's all about. But actually, we also want to support the growth of the movement. And I think London certainly helped kick the movement forward with a massive kickstart. But, we've still got a way to go. It's a new movement. Yes, we've made massive strides in the 20 years plus that I've been part of the BPA and part of the movement, but there's more to come. We haven't reached the ceiling by any means.
And what's your day-to-day role now as Director of Sport at the British Paralympic Association?
Yeah, I'm part of our exec team, so obviously responsible for the overall strategy delivery. So we launched a new strategy, a 10-year strategy last year called Championing Change. And that strategy is very much two-pronged. Part of the strategy is being that world-leading team on the field of play, and part of the strategy is actually how we use success on the field of play to champion change off the field of play. So how do we change perceptions? How do we create a better lived experience for disabled people? How do we use our position to influence, to advocate? And it's a hugely exciting strategy, and one that the whole organisation has embraced, which is fantastic to see. So there's that kind of level of leadership and director responsibility. And then obviously I lead a small but perfectly formed sport team who are absolutely amazing. Work very closely with the director of operations in and around everything to do with best prepared teams. And, I've been responsible for leading the development of our best prepared team strategy over multiple game cycles, including our funding submissions to UK sport. And we're hugely grateful as a BPA for the lottery support that we've had via UK Sport as far back, I think, as sort of Sydney 2000. So it's a massive part of enabling us to be that world leading National Paralympic Committee. And, long may it continue.
And what is it for you personally that makes parasport so special, that you've remained in that space for so long?
Yeah, so I guess from sort of fairly shaky beginnings, it didn't take long actually, having made that decision, come on, I can make a difference here. As soon as I met the athletes and a couple of the first camps I went on, one was with boccia, and it was just eye-opening just to see their talent and the skill that they have. And that was like, crikey, I had no idea, but just fell in love with it, fell in love with the sport side of things, multi-sport, from, boccia to, newer sports such as para badminton, para canoe, triathlon, the athletic swimming. It's an amazing environment to be working with so many different sports, summer and winter. So that in itself is hugely exciting as a sport fan, but also just the athletes. There were just so many, nice is a very strange word, but lovely people. They're absolutely ferocious in their competitive nature and determined to do well. But there was just so many great people, the coaches, the PDs, the team leaders. It kind of feels like, I love a hashtag that, and I use "in it together." It kind of feels like we're in it together, and we're there working to support the ambitions of the athletes, to support the success of the team. But also, I think the broader success of the UK high performance system. It really has felt like a journey of belonging and belonging to something that is hugely exciting, that has evolved over successive game cycles. And as I've already said, I think the best is still to come, or more is still to come. So it's fresh. Every game is different. Every team is different. And that's what makes it, for me, just so exciting. Can we create those environments where every athlete and staff member can deliver those personal best and, medal-winning performances? Can we create those environments? We get one chance every 4 years, summer and winter, to create environments where team members have a fantastic time. And clearly we're there to deliver performance, but we're also very, very conscious about team experience. And that, for me, is the challenge, to get the balance, but also to create the opportunities to absolutely smash it on the performance front, and to see smiles, and just to hear that, the laughter and the camaraderie. And despite the challenges, and whether it be Rio, whether it be Tokyo, Pyeongchang, Beijing, there were so many smiles. There was fun, there was laughter, and yes, there was so much challenge. But I think being part of teams that have come together in support of the athlete ambitions and had an amazing time in doing so.
You paint such an exciting picture, making me goosebumps just thinking about it. And I guess that feeling of the Paralympic sport too. We obviously saw such a huge transformation for Paralympic sport around London 2012, which you've alluded to. So how did that feel, being on the other side, almost being inside the sport?
Oh, 2012 was incredible. And we got a new CEO in 2011, Tim Hollingsworth, who's now obviously CEO at Sport England, and working with our director of Marcons at the time, Jane Jones. And they were just a formidable force to be reckoned with in terms of the ambition that they could see, in terms of, we wanted to be successful on the field of play, but we had this twin track ambition, which was to change perceptions and create change off the field of play. And the reality was that the media hadn't really ever really grasped the potential of parasport. So my first games in 2004 on the Paralympic side, Tanni Gray-Thompson probably winning her 9th and 10th gold medals in Athens, probably in front of about 200 people and a similar number of dogs in the National Stadium. And I was just so sad. I didn't understand why there was this great sport, but nobody seemed to care. And the British media at that time hadn't embraced parasport, and it took awarding of the home games in 2005 and Channel 4 stepping up into that space to really do justice and to shine the spotlight on para athletes for the first time. And I talk about the athletes stepping out of the shadows of their Olympic counterparts, and that media spotlight, as well as filled stadia, which was obviously another part of the success of London, just meant that so many people realised just how brilliant parasport is, how incredible the athletes are, and embraced it. And it was such a step forward. And I think that we did, we were successful on the field of play, and we started to make some inroads. And whilst that hasn't necessarily been a linear progression, I think that the ambition that the organisation clearly stated was one that I think has stood us in good stead as a movement, as an organisation, and one that just still needs to continue to be worked on. We can't be complacent in this space. And I think Hannah Cockcroft just in the last few weeks has talked about reigniting the passion for parasport, and with a European game so very close over in Paris, we're hoping that without crowds in Tokyo, there wasn't necessarily the same passion, the same fervour. But I think that the Parisians are going to host an incredible games, and I think there'll be thousands and thousands of travelling fans who, again, I think it will reignite the passion for parasport, and then just, I guess, reinforce that platform that allows the athletes to use their voice for change and positive change for disabled people.
And you talk about that twin ambition there, and I've had huge privilege on the Game Changers to talk to Paralympians like Tanni Gray-Thompson and Hannah Cockcroft, Sarah Story. And sometimes they've mentioned that the positioning of para-athletes as almost superhumans can sometimes be detrimental to disabled people, because the public then think every disabled person should be able to compete at elite sport. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting debate. And I think at the time, Channel 4, let's not underestimate the incredible work that Channel 4 have done to champion parasport. And that's not just in the UK, that's on a global basis. And I think the Superhumans was laying down a challenge that, don't underestimate the potential, the talent, the capability of athletes with a disability, and hence the Superhumans. And especially as parasport hadn't really been seen. So I think it was a positioning, it was a marketing, and it was also, I think, respectful of the fact that para-athletes are incredible athletes. Let's not forget that. First and foremost, they are incredible athletes. I think, the sort of, I guess, unintended consequences that the general public love parasport, but maybe then some misconceptions that, well, if they can do that, then every disabled person can achieve that on the field of play. And that's not the case in non-disabled sport. So, we just need, I think, just to have a little bit of a reality check there. It's a continuum, isn't it? Participation. So there are non-disabled and disabled people that do sport to stay as fit and well as they possibly can for their mental health, for, grassroots participation. And there are others who aspire to be the very best of the very best. And not everyone will be an Olympian who is even an elite athlete. And the same goes for Paralympic sport. So, yeah, I think, there's still work to do in the space of, in terms of education and messaging. And, but I do think, we've made huge strides, especially in terms of London, treated a whole nation to parasport. Every kid in the country did a project on Olympic and Paralympic athletes. We now have generations that have grown up with parasport being in the spotlight. And I do think that, there's a lot that has been done in and around messaging and education and developing understanding. But it's an ongoing process, isn't it?
Absolutely. And what is the next big shift that you'd like to see in terms of parasport? We talked about that, the shift that came with London 2012, but is there something else that will move us forward in a more momentous way?
Is it revolution or is it evolution? I mean, I think, where we are now as a parasport movement, the IPC are as young as we are as a BPA. So, we're still very young in the movement's history. And I think the IPC is working really hard to extend the global reach of parasport, which is important. So creating more global diversity. I think it's working really hard, just as nations are, in terms of using the athlete voice to create social change, which has become a hugely significant part of their work. I think global standards will continue to improve as more nations get involved, as more nations see the value and the importance and the significance of parasport. I think, there's still work to do in and around the classification system as one example of sort of technical areas within the movement that need to improve. So, yeah, I think there's lots of headroom, and certainly from our perspective as the Paralympics GB, every cycle we're looking to be better, and we are at this sort of the upper end of sophistication. But let's not forget, the UK high performance system is world leading, and we've still got lots and lots of areas where we can improve in terms of athlete preparation, coach preparation, you name it. We're still pushing at a very open door, I think, in terms of enhancements and improvements that can be made in and around the team.
And your chef de mission for Paralympics GB, can you tell us a bit about what that role entails?
So chef de mission, I think, it's clearly a French term and obviously means chief of the mission. And I do still get asked what I like to cook. And I can tell you that whilst I do like cooking, the thought of cooking for 550 teammates is not, I think, where my skill set lies. So, yeah, it's in really basic terms, it's team leader, isn't it? It's leader of the team. So I take responsibility for the team at the Games. We have a president and secretary general that takes sort of responsibility for sort of all of the things outside of the team in terms of all of our guests and sponsors. And so we sort of divide responsibilities between the sort of athletes and staff team, and then the wider Games delivery footprint, which is huge for us as a Paralympics GB. So working with my chef de mission team, we look to create the best possible environment from which to deliver performance. We look at ways that we can ensure a positive team experience. We look at ways as to how each and every team member can thrive. So if we can thrive in that high-pressured environment that comes around once every 4 years, for some athletes, some staff, it only comes around once. How do we create an environment where everyone can deliver those personal bests? And when I talk about personal best, I mean me as a staff member and the whole 250 other staff members as well. If we're delivering at our best, then the chances are we're supporting the athletes to do exactly the same. So we talk about whole team when we talk about positive team experience. We talk about whole team when we talk about thriving, and we talk about whole team when we talk about having a positive experience. And, it's incumbent on me as chef to ensure we uphold the highest standards of excellence in all of our planning, that we work collaboratively with the national governing bodies. So it really is in it together, that we understand the environment that we're going into, because that ultimately is the role of the National Paralympic Committee, and that we work with the team leaders to understand our team. As I've already said, no two Paralympics GB teams is the same. No Games environment is exactly the same. So it's trying to keep on the front foot so that we are able to maximise the opportunity that each Games affords us as a Paralympics GB.
And for the last few Games, you alluded to that earlier, but you faced this enormous additional challenges. So in Rio, Paralympics almost didn't take place when the city went bankrupt. You then had extreme heat and humidity to contend with in Tokyo, and all the challenges around COVID in Beijing. So how do you personally cope with the tremendous pressure that comes in that position?
I just love the Games. I can't think of a better environment to be in. And I think if you've got that mindset, that is just, it's a great starting point. I just reflect often on Vancouver 2010, and it was pre-athletes arriving in Village. And I just noticed myself, that sort of, I guess, proprioception, that I was kind of walking with a bounce in my stride, which I'm not sure is I don't think I normally have that swagger. But, when I get into that environment, I sort of like shoulders back, chin up, big smile. This is it. This is the opportunity, and embrace that opportunity. And, we all have mechanisms to cope when we're under pressure. Mine is I like to exercise. I think I'm also really fortunate in terms I've worked with some incredible teams. My current chef de mission team is hugely experienced. We've got a senior leadership team that is passionate, dedicated, hardworking. We've got great experience of issue and incident management through Sochi, Rio, Pyeongchang, Tokyo, Beijing. We've had a run of really challenging games, but I think we've grown as individuals and we've grown as a team in terms of how we've managed those environments. And Rio, as you said, I ended up going into Rio early, not knowing, with Verity Naylor, our director of operations, not really knowing what we were going to find. And it was challenging. And, you set yourself simple tasks, and being handed the building over from Team GB, and the cleaners had been suspended because there was widespread theft. And it was like, okay, the first thing is let's make this building shine. So we started with the chef team apartment. And then as people came in, we sort of expanded that ambition and, get the science and medicine areas up and running. Let's bring in some new cleaners. Let's get the apartment sorted. And when the athletes arrived, I had a lot of athletes contacting me and saying, Penny, is it going to be okay? And it's going to be okay, guys. It's going to be okay. Just get yourselves over here. And they arrived, and it was like, oh, what's the issue? This looks amazing. And obviously, there were challenges throughout the games, but we took control of what we could control, and we created that home from home, that environment where the athletes came in, looks amazing, let's crack on, business as usual in terms of them delivering those performances. And they were hearing stories from other nations that were having a terrible time. And, certainly from my perspective, I think we endeared ourselves to the organising committee in that we tried to support them. We weren't going to the press bad-mouthing. We just tried to do what we could do, because ultimately it's about creating that environment for the athletes who've been working so hard. And the last thing they want to hear from us is us moaning. They want us to hear positivity, and it's going to be okay. And it was okay, and it was an incredible games. And, similarly going into Tokyo, games that might not have happened because of COVID. And it was the most challenging environment that I've been involved in. And, it's a massive thanks to colleagues at Team GB as well, in terms of how collaborative they were in terms of sharing experiences. So we had some insights of what we might be facing. But again, it kind of felt like we talked earlier on about what's special about the parasport movement, and athletes arrived and again, didn't bemoan the situation. They were just grateful that they had an opportunity to compete. And they'd worked so hard under, really challenging prep conditions at home and very little competition. And, we had stories of Ryan shooting shed, of one of the shooters setting up a shooting area through his house into a shed in his garden. There was all sorts of incredible stuff going on. But seeing the athletes' smiling faces getting off the bus, coming into the village, brought a tear to my eye. And it really was. It kind of felt like a siege mentality at times. But we came together as the most cohesive team. And I think one of my concerns going into Tokyo is that we wouldn't get kind of positive reflections on the games or the team experience. And it was actually quite the contrary, in terms of multi-games athletes saying it was actually my best games, the best experience. And I think it was that siege mentality of us being in it together and brought us together as a team, and the camaraderie and the support. It was just unbelievable. And I think it's testimony to the mindset of our athletes and their support teams and the Paralympics GB support team as well.
And how did the delay to Tokyo and then having just 3 years between the games impact your role? I feel you've been very hard to get hold of, so I know that you're really busy, but has it made a massive difference having 25% less time almost to prep for Paris?
Yeah, I mean, Tokyo, as I say, was brutal because we just planned and replanned and planned and replanned and ripped up plans, and everything was happening really last minute. And it meant that we were trying to focus as well on Beijing, which we knew was going to be just 6 months after. And where we ended up was splitting the chef de mission role between summer and winter games. So I was focusing on Tokyo. Well, we're all focusing on Tokyo, to be honest, but we'd appointed Phil Smith as first-time chef de mission for Beijing. So when we got home from Tokyo, I led all the post-Tokyo debriefs, while Phil and his team just went full steam ahead with that 6-month window. And again, facing the same challenges that we had in Tokyo of late information, planning, replanning, COVID challenges, COVID countermeasures. That I think the approach paid off. Phil and his team did an incredible job in Beijing. And in that sort of 6 months, I was focusing more on Paris and getting the sort of the plan that was there. It had been there, 18 months, sort of resurrecting that plan and trying to fast track it. So it does feel at times we've been playing catch up going into Paris. But, again, I think we're confident, we're confident that we've dealt with such challenging games that it might not be our optimal delivery time frame. But actually, we kind of know what we're doing and what to expect. We're all looking forward to a non-COVID games, keeping everything crossed. We're looking forward to a games that's just across the water. We're looking forward to, I think it will be a spectacular games. I think the Paris organising committee will do an amazing job. And I think just being positive that it's our next opportunity to showcase brilliant para sport to global audiences. And we're all working hard. It's probably one of our most complex master plans because we've got so many sports that are actually preparing in the UK. We've got a handful of sports that are preparing in and around Paris. We've got lots of different accommodations in and around Paris. We've got a huge guest and commercial program and friends and family. So it's going to be really, really exciting. And we're just under now 500 days to go, and it really does feel like it's hotting up. Lots and lots of qualification events coming up for the sport. So it sort of feels like it's getting to the pointy end of the cycle, and that we missed quite a bit of the front end of the cycle, but we're getting there.
Super exciting. You've obviously had such a long career at the same organisation, but it's an organisation that's changed significantly over time too. I was going to ask you if you've considered other roles, but when I hear your passion and enthusiasm, I can kind of see why not. But have you thought about other sports, other roles in your time there?
Yeah, I had a bit of a sticky patch just in terms of how I was feeling about my role, sort of Beijing time, but the sort of the lure of London really, I guess, kept me going. And then with Tim Hollingsworth coming in 2011, we just created a sort of relationship, CEO, director of sport, chef de mission relationship that was incredible, really complementary skill sets. I was disappointed not to get the chef gig going into our home games in 12, but sort of Tim explained to me that it was really important that I work closely with him to get the new strategy online. And, Craig Hunter came in as chef de mission, and I had a bit of a wobble at that point. And it was another one of those moments where I sort of sat down and had a stern talking to myself as to, if I walked away at that stage, what would it say about me and my values? What would it say about me and everything that I'd committed to parasport over that first decade? And that, I was as passionate as to support the athletes going into London as I ever was. And I just had to put my personal ambition sort of slightly on the side burner and hope that I would get an opportunity based on continued good performance. And I did. And it's relationships like the one that I had with Tim that really, really help reignite your passion sometimes. And as I said, every game is different. Every team is different. London was a catalyst to being, in some ways, feeling like I was in a different movement post-London than I had been. And it just felt it was, an opportunity to stay and just to see where we were going. It was just so good to see the athletes being recognised. It was so good. Strictly Come Dancing, to Question of Sport, to the Bake Off, you name it. Para athletes were there. Pre-London, probably Tanni Gray and Addy were the two athletes that sort of the general public knew about. But every community now has embraced parasport, has their own parasport heroes. And, it's quite right that we're seeing the guys get the recognition that they deserve. So, yeah, I'd say, if a game's two halves, then my career at the BPA has been the sort of the pre-London and then the post-London. And us as an organisation, we're far more ambitious, having had the opportunity of the home games, to really sort of strike out in terms of our strategy and not just the sort of championing change in terms of the sort of the advocacy. We've got a parasport platform, which is now rebranded as Everybody Moves. It's a community platform designed to engage, get connections, provide opportunities. And, we know that disabled people were disproportionately impacted by COVID. We know the similar disproportionality of the cost of living crisis. And And I think we're ambitious to play a role in terms of creating opportunity, creating a difference, championing change, just kind of what it says on the tin, really. So it's an exciting time. And I think if you get up in the morning and you feel passionate and you can smile about the day you've got ahead, why would you seek something else if you don't believe it would be better?
Brilliant. And lastly, I was really excited to learn that your daughter Lizzie is a potential world-class athlete too. So can you tell me about her ambitions and I guess what it feels like on the other side of being a parent of an athlete at that level too?
I empathise and sympathise with every sporting parent, especially with very determined young athletes. It's if I'm going to get myself into hot water, Lizzie hates me talking about her and sport. So Lizzie is part of the British Triathlon programme. Just like her mum, she's an out-and-out sports nut. Her brother was equally a sporty, but is moving on to other university endeavours. But Lizzie's been, I think, really fortunate in terms of she's a talented athlete. She played for Derby Football Academy, Girls Academy. Great runner before finding triathlon, which was through school, a very, very committed teacher who is now a family friend. So thank you, Helen Dussick. Thank you, For Life Tri Club here in Notts. Great support, a great volunteer base. And then moving through to sort of, the regional academy, onto the England Next Generation squads, getting selected for GB Youth, GB Junior, and last year getting her first international medals as an individual and also a mixed team relay bronze in the European Championship. So, it is thanks to the British Triathlon pathway, which does support young athletes really well. And she's at Leeds University now, which is obviously one of the key centres for British Tri. She's got a new coach in Nom Stanford, which she's hugely excited by. And I think she's just a really pragmatic young athlete in terms of she wants to continue to get better in each of the disciplines. She knows how important that is. She's a really honest, hardworking athlete. And I think she just wants to be able to represent Great Britain at every level. And she's got a challenging year, first year uni. She's stepped up into the under-23 age category. So hopefully it's just a year of consolidation and then looking to where that might go in terms of future GB selection. So I just wanted to be happy and healthy and to love a sport. And, I love sport. I've loved sport all my life. And, I know the opportunities that it can give you, not just in terms of being an elite athlete, but the life skills that being in the sporting environment, I guess, enables you with. So, yeah, we'll see.
I really enjoyed talking to Penny. If you'd like to hear more from other senior women leading British sport, head over to fearlesswomen.co.uk, where you'll find other episodes where I speak to the likes of Sally Mundy, Liz Nichol, Catherine Granger, Sue Day and Claire Connor. As well as listening to all the podcasts on the website, you can also find out more about the Women's Sport Collective, a free, inclusive community for all women working in sport. You can sign up for the Fearless Women newsletter, which highlights the developments in global women's sport, and there's more about my book, Game On, The Unstoppable Rise of Women's Sport. Thank you again to Sport England for backing the Game Changers through a National Lottery Award, and to Sam Walker at What Goes On Media, who does such a great job as our executive producer. Thank you also to my colleague at Fearless Women, Kate Hannon. The Game Changers is free to listen to and you can find it on all podcast platforms. Do follow us or subscribe to make sure you don't miss out on future episodes. And if you have a moment to leave a review or a rating, it'd be much appreciated as it really helps us to reach new audiences. Do come and say hello on social media, where you'll find me on Instagram, LinkedIn and Twitter at Sue Anstis. The Game Changers. Fearless Women in Sport.